You're listening to The Practicing Law Librarian. This limited series is part of PLI's Ever Current podcast, where we bring you insights and updates from legal thought leaders. Find additional episodes at pli.edu or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Karen Osterly. Welcome to the Practicing Law Librarian podcast, presented by PLI's Legal Information Services Group. This podcast brings you conversations with and for the law librarian community. As a practicing law librarian myself, I've been working in legal information services for 34 years, currently with PLI's Library Relations Group. And I have with me today Rebecca Katz, Executive Director of Justice Access. Join us and see how her lifelong commitment to serving those in need led her to found justiceaccess.org, a free online law library for DC residents who need a law library but lack access to one. Among the library's long-term plans is providing training to non-librarians so they can learn to do legal research and show others how to find the answers they need. Seminal experiences for Becky include her work with the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau while in law school and her tenure as state archivist for the District of Columbia. To read her full bio, please see our podcast page. Becky and I met online. She is part of LLSDC, as I am, and she posted an email about Justice Access looking for reference librarians to help staff this online library. And so we met online, and then we met in person in March at the SEAL conference in Richmond. I'm delighted that you could join us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So can you tell me, I know you're a law librarian, and you also run this new library. Can you tell me about your work and your background and how you got to be a law librarian?
Oh, goodness. Well, so my professional path has been a long and winding road. I will share that when I was very young, I wanted to be an archaeologist and a professional golfer. Neither of those happened, obviously. But the real part of my professional path, I knew since I was in high school that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I wanted to do First Amendment work, and then I wanted to do special education work. And I ended up getting a position after law school where I was representing adults with disabilities. I went from that to a policy job, to an administrative law job, to a legislative job, and then to library school at the same time as the legislative job. And intended to go into law librarianship when I finished library school, but didn't. I actually got a job in archives. And then finally, I ended up in the law librarian world. That said, the very first time I went into the law library at law school, I went to Harvard Law. And if you have been to the Langdell Law Library, you know it's gorgeous and everything you could want in a library. And when I decided to go to library school, I had this fleeting memory that the first time I had walked into Langdell, I had thought, maybe I should be a law librarian. But that thought had sort of gone away for a while and then came back, and now here I am.
So you weren't going to be, did I get that straight? You weren't going to be a law librarian. You went to library school having a JD, and then you went to do archival work. So you were an archival librarian?
So my library degree does have a specialization in law librarianship.
Okay.
I just didn't go there directly from library school.
Okay. Yeah, mine did too. You know, you could choose a focus, and so I chose law librarianship, but it took me a while to get into it. So you worked at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau while in law school.
So the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau is the oldest student-run legal clinic in the United States. It is, goodness gracious, it's almost 110 years old now. When I was there, when I was a member of the Bureau, I represented people in housing cases, some benefits cases, and one family law case.
Cool. So good preparation.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you noted, state archivist for the District of Columbia. So is that the job you're talking about? From library school, you went to work for the DC government?
Yes. Yes. So I had been working for the DC government. The policy job I mentioned, the administrative job I mentioned, those were both for the DC government. And so while I was in library school, some things sort of coalesced in my mind that made me think that I knew, or I suspected rather, that the state archivist position was going to be vacant at about the time that I was graduating. And I had ideas on ways to help the State Archives of DC serve the people of DC better than it had the capacity to at that time. And I was fortunate that they hired me. I was less fortunate in the financial resources that the archives had. And all of those grand ideas I had, I learned that the reason why they hadn't been doing those things already was simply a lack of resources. So yeah, we all had these grand goals that we were really going to serve the people of DC and provide really good access to the history of the government. And it's tough to do that with only 6 people.
That's very small. I mean, for that population.
Yes, very small.
I spent 7 years in Arlington, Virginia, and worked in D.C. So I had law firms and a number of the government agencies, but I didn't even know there was an archive, a D.C. archive. So maybe not a lot of publicity.
Yeah, one of the things that I opted not to do in that position was I opted not to do a lot of outreach, because if we had done too much outreach, we would not have been able to have the capacity to actually help researchers if we had too many more researchers than we already did have.
Okay. So then how did you get from there to Justice Access? I mean, it sounds like these were factors that led to what you're doing now.
Yes. So I did end up without a job in the middle of the pandemic. Oh. And I used that opportunity to think more broadly about where my passions lie and where my skills lie and what I wanted to do next, since I had been working for the DC government for 15 years almost, and I was going to need to make some sort of a change. And all of the thinking I had done while I was in library school about what problems existed that maybe I could have a role in solving came back to me. And one of those problems was a severe shortage of access to law libraries for members of the public in DC. And so I decided I would try and do something about that. And so here we are. I started a nonprofit and my best to help provide access to legal information.
So for people who don't know anything about justiceaccess.org, how do you explain that? Like you meet somebody new and you say, yes, I'm involved with justiceaccess.org. This is an online law library for people that need it and don't have regular access. What do you say to somebody who's like, what? What do you do?
Well, you just summarized it very well. And that's pretty much, that's about what I say. What I share is that our primary program right now is our virtual reference desk, which is a video chat platform where individuals can be connected with a law librarian face-to-face or face-to-voice if the patron is not interested in being on camera, because only do we keep our patrons' information and questions confidential because we're librarians, and that's a key tenet of our professional responsibility. But we also want to allow our patrons to be as anonymous as possible.
Right.
Because their questions might be sensitive. And so if they aren't comfortable being on camera, we let them keep their camera off. And our librarians keep their cameras on for comfort, for the patron's comfort.
Right.
And patron can ask their ask their question, bring up their legal issue. The librarian explains we're not attorneys, but then helps go through the research process with the patron so that hopefully the patron gets the information that they're looking for and is empowered to some degree to be able to move forward with whatever issue they're facing.
Right. And you began it during COVID?
During COVID, yes. So we started in October of 2021. So it's been a bit over 18 months now, but we've been offering the reference desk since about this October. Well, October 22.
Okay. And what do you foresee? What is your vision of what it will become, or do you like the idea that it'll remain constant as it is now?
So our ultimate goal is to have a bookmobile, and so that we'll have a physical presence, a mobile presence that we can bring into the community where our patrons are based. We will have a small collection of books. Books do have value, even in these internet-based days. But the primary focus will still be on the interaction with the librarian.
I had no idea that you had a bookmobile planned, a law library, a mobile law library. I had no idea. That's very cool. How do you picture it?
I picture that we will have some computers on our bookmobile. And so that our librarian will be able to walk through the research with the patron, just the same way or similar to how we do in the virtual environment. But by being in the community, one of the issues that we hope to address is that, and this is a data point or a statistic that is I believe it's in the 2017 Legal Services Corporation Access to Justice report. And if it's not, it's in the 2019 DC Access to Justice Commission report, that one of the reasons why people don't get legal services is because they don't know that their issues are legal.
Right.
And so, yes, we are a law library and we are advertising ourselves as a law library. And if someone doesn't know that their issue is legal, they're not going to think to come to a law library.
Right.
But if we're out in the community, if we're interacting with people in the community, then hopefully that will be a much more comfortable position for someone to walk in and say, hey, my neighbor said you might be able to help. And so that's sort of one of our reasons for wanting to have this physical presence.
Okay. It sounds like that would be easier to make a safe connection and make a personal connection if they're in the neighborhood. If we're in the neighborhood and the patrons are in the neighborhood, it's like, oh, okay, somebody said something about that. Let me go check that out. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. And certainly we want patrons to use it. Do you work with schools? Have you connected with law schools or library schools to help staff this, to help fund it?
And not funding. Funding is, currently all individual donations.
Okay.
So anyone who's listening who wants to donate should feel free. We have reached out to library schools to offer internships. I'm really excited that we actually have gotten some applications for the fall. So really excited about that. And in terms of, since you asked about staffing, one of our other sort of longer term goals that goes sort of hand in hand with what we were talking about being out in the community, is we want to create a staffing pipeline that does not require our reference assistants to be either officially trained in law or officially trained in librarianship, so that we can hire members of the community as reference assistants. We can't do that right away because we need to develop a training curriculum.
Right.
but we're really hopeful that we can do that so that we really are a trusted part of the community.
That's brilliant. Wow. I mean, that's like everything you read about that works well, involve the community as teachers because you learn by teaching. And we both know that's the best way to learn something is practicing it and teaching it and showing somebody else. So that's fabulous. I didn't know any of this.
Part of the reason why you haven't known some of this is because it's not in place yet. And you can have the best ideas, but the implementation is much more difficult. So it's a slow process, sure. But we're getting there.
And we've begun. You've begun a year and a half.
Yes.
And reference for, going on a year. So I'm a book person, and I spent 25 years with Matthew Bender and LexisNexis selling law books. And so I'm intrigued by the fact that you're going to have some books and hopefully a couple of computer monitors and online access. What do you picture for books? I mean, is this like the DC Code? Is this like the DC practice guides from various publishers?
I am anticipating probably some NOLO publications.
Yep. Excellent.
Because those are so great for self-represented litigants. Practice guides as well. Yeah, probably not statutory codes, simply because particularly with DC has a legislature that really it operates consistently throughout the 2-year council period. And laws are effective consistently throughout. So it's not like, for example, in Maryland, where all of the laws that are passed have the same effective date of June 1st, I believe it is. And because of the continual nature of DC laws, using the online publications much more reliable than using a print publication. That said, one of the things I've done is measured the length of the Maryland, DC, and Virginia codes so that we can make sure that we have space, when we develop the specifications for the bookmobile, in case that's what we decide we want to do.
Yeah, so you've got all the linear feet, you've got all that already captured.
Yes.
Shelf feet.
Yes. So I also want to say that one of the other things that we want to have on the bookmobile is a small selection of children's books and easily cleaned toys so that parents can bring their kids so that they're not in need of a babysitter, just so that they can go and get some help from us. And so that is an important use of this physical space that can't be replicated online.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm going to go ahead and talk about, if I could, Fastcase is the one who supplies the case law for DC, case law and the statutes, if memory serves. And Fastcase is also a partner with PLI in our PLI Plus. Do you use our platform where you are now?
So I do have a day job. And at my day job, we do have a PLI subscription.
Okay, great. So you probably know in our secondary sources, there are frequent links to cases and statutes. And those if you ever click on those, the link takes you to Fastcase. And we love them. So I was delighted to see that they're also a partner for justiceaccess.org. So that's a wonderful thing.
Yes. Ed Walters, who's I don't remember if his job title is CEO or executive director.
I think he's president. I think Phil is CEO.
Okay. I met Ed when I was working for the DC Council, and he's just been a really great partner back when we were working on Uniform Electronic Legal Materials Act, back when I was at the DC Council, and now with Justice Access.
That's wonderful.
I did have a really great conversation just today, actually, with the law librarian at the Public Defender Service of DC.
Excellent.
And we talked about ways that Justice Access can assist incarcerated individuals. And obviously, our online method of serving patrons won't work for that. But we did talk about providing a mailing address so that incarcerated individuals can write to us and ask for help. And so that will also be, obviously won't be our virtual, but we'll be able to assist those individuals as well. I had been waiting for a reason to pull the trigger on a virtual mailbox. So we've done that now. I'm looking forward to helping a broader range of individuals.
Good.
I just learned there is a program at the AALL conference next month about incarcerated individuals being our patrons as well. So I'm really excited about going to that session and getting more advice and more ideas for how Justice Access can really make sure that we are reaching all parts of our community.
Great. And will you be, I'm sorry, I don't know the whole schedule. Are you speaking in Boston?
I submitted a poster proposal.
Oh, okay.
And I submitted a discussion den proposal. So I don't know if either of those will be accepted.
Okay.
But the discussion den would be to talk about unauthorized practice of law, because that is an issue that law librarians who serve members of the public come up against daily.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting when we met at the Southeast branch of the association. Anyway, when we met at SEAL in Richmond in March, it was wonderful that you had an opportunity to tell people that came to your presentation about Justice Access and what you're doing. And so I imagine that you spend a lot of time and energy getting the word out and, expanding on what people know about it in different areas and different groups. And so I imagine that you'll be doing a fair amount of that in Boston.
That's my plan.
We have another podcast. Well, we have several others. One is called Insecurities, and one is on professional development topics. But we have a pro bono podcast that's very well established. This one, of course, is new. But anyway, I'll send you a link to that. There's really quite a bit of content there. Wonderful content about, public service and pro bono work that attorneys are doing and librarians. So you've been a law librarian since, when did you get your library degree? 2011?
I graduated from library school in 2015.
2015, okay. All right. What are the most important learnings that you would want to share with fellow law librarians?
So I think my first thing I would say is that it's okay to change your mind about what type of library you want to work in. It's okay to change your mind about what you want to do more broadly. If you go to library school and you think you want to be an academic law librarian, great. But if you get there and you decide that you'd really rather work with members of the public, you can go and find a public law library to work in.
Right.
If you decide you really don't want to work with members of the public, go work in a firm library. You're still doing really important work, regardless of type of library you're working in. And maybe you decide you don't want to be a law librarian at all, but you want to be a public librarian. Don't feel like you've trapped yourself when you get your first job out of library school.
Right, because there are lots of different choices. And every firm is different, too. Every library is different because of the people that work there and the patrons and the procedures.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by the path that you've taken, public service and legal aid, and just lots of different steps leading you to this place where you've created this amazing, wonderful, generous, kind thing and invited other people in to help you with it. What do you wish you had known when you began your work career? So way back when you got out of college, and did you go right from college to law school?
Yes, I went straight from college to law school. That's a terrible idea.
What do you wish you had known when you, at that point?
Everyone says you should take time off between college and law school, and I didn't listen because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And I also didn't listen because I majored in philosophy and therefore had no marketable skills. So I went straight to law school. I wish at that point in my career, I wish I had known what options there were professionally for someone who has an undergraduate degree in philosophy.
Right.
Because looking back with many, many, many years of experience, I think it's wise to have a little bit more maturity under your belt before going to any graduate school. But particularly professional school, I don't know, it might be different, if you're going on to get a PhD in some academic subject. But beyond that, I would say one of the things that has been a hard learned lesson for me is, it's a little embarrassing to admit that, I had to learn this, but education is not everything. I grew up in a family where everyone has a graduate degree. The only person in my family who does not have a graduate degree at this point today is my nephew, who is still a sophomore in college. And there's a lot of Ivy League in my family tree. So even though it wasn't intentional, I was raised with this attitude of more school is better and more exclusive school is better. And it's really been a process to unlearn that. And because I'm working on unlearning that. That is something that I want to put into practice. And so that's part of why I have this goal that I mentioned of training community members to serve as reference assistants for our reference desk.
Okay. It's a good one. I also have a BA in philosophy. And I went to UVA undergrad, and I knew I was going to grad school. So I was able to choose what I wanted to study. That was fun. I started out as a math major. I was going to be a math major and go to work for IBM. And that was fine for Calculus 1 and 2, but Calculus 3, that was the end of that path.
So I did minor in math. I knew that I didn't want to major in math, but I did minor in it. And I did very well until I could no longer picture on a piece of paper or, even in 3D. Once I could no longer draw, once we were in 4 dimensions, and still follow, formulas, but it became a lot harder when it became more abstract. And yeah, I would not have done well trying to make math into a profession.
I would have done okay with it. I discovered that there was a job for people like me being an actuary. I was like, oh, there's a job for this.
Yes.
But as Calculus 3 still did me in. So then I was going to major in economics for a while. And I was really good with the micro stuff. But the macroeconomics, trying to figure out how the social world, the real world in real life, IRL, how the economics worked that way, I just could not grasp it. But there was a student in my macroeconomics class who always saw the point, always saw the incisive point, and asked the professor the hard questions like, why is it here on the line and not there? And the professor would sort of, that smile when you didn't really want to be asked that question. This happened a lot with the student. The professor would say, well, sometimes you just have to take these things on faith, or, he would try to explain why it was this point and not that point. Anyway, this student was a philosophy student. And so I thought, okay, well, let me check that out. And so then I started taking those courses and finished up that way. We spoke about superpowers. Can you tell me what your superpower is?
My superpower is I have an amazing ability to find typos. So unfortunately, that doesn't really add value to my work with Justice Access, but it makes me great at being a last set of eyes on documents.
Very cool. Very cool. Becky, what are you reading these days?
So starting in the middle of the first year of COVID, I stopped being able to really focus on serious reading, and I started reading romance novels. And right now, I am reading a book by the author, I don't actually know how to pronounce her last name, Chloe Liese, Liese. She has a series of romance novels about where the main characters all have some sort of many of them are neurodivergent or have physical disabilities. And she has, taken the care to be sensitive in how she portrays these characters. And she makes sure that she has beta readers for authenticity. They're really enjoyable books. Some of the way the characters, describe their interactions with the world really rings true to me.
And what would you recommend other people read? You don't have to be reading it currently, just at any point.
That is such a good question. On the serious front, and this is not all that new anymore, but the new Jim Crow, I think everyone should read that.
Do you have books that you reread regularly?
When I have the attention span to read 1,000-page novels, I am a big fan of Herman Wouk and Leon Uris. And so the Winds of War and War and Remembrance, I come back to them regularly, as well as Exodus by Leon Uris. I also like James Michener. I don't reread so many of his books because I don't own many of them. But those are other books that I really enjoy when I have the attention span.
You had written me that you conform to the stereotype of a librarian in comfortable shoes surrounded by many cats. Can you tell me about your cats, please?
So I have 2 cats of my own, Skates and Shadow, and I foster through the Humane Rescue Alliance, which is DC's open access shelter. So right now I have a 15-year-old kitty named Christina who is hanging out with us. I love my cats. They're the best part of my house. And I think we have a friend outside, but I have only gotten the briefest of glimpses of friend. I left a plate of food out and it did not get eaten. So we'll see if we end up with another cat. I love dogs. I grew up terrified of dogs, but I have grown to love them. I do not own dogs because dogs require being taken out in all sorts of weather, including rain and snow and very hot. And I do not like weather. So, therefore, I have cats.
Well, Becky, thank you. Thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Practicing Law Librarian, part of PLI's Ever Current podcast. Be sure to subscribe and listen to our latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. And to learn more about the Practicing Law Institute, please visit pli.edu. To learn more about PLI Plus, which provides electronic access to the full collection of PLI Press publications, and schedule a demo with a member of our team, please visit pli.edu/plus. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI.